All right. Hello, everybody. I'll give everyone a couple minutes to get here before I get too much into the meat and bones of it. And that's just as well. I am a little bit frazzled myself. Levi has been building stuff around the house for the last several weeks, and I usually have a great tolerance for it. But then it just, like, I reach a point where I just can't take it anymore. All the noise and the inconvenience. Hey, Britt, I'm glad you're here. All the noise and inconvenience and, like, not being able to work because, you know, what I do kind of relies on, like, good audio, and then if he's making tons of noise outside or has the radio blasting and I just can't work and I can't concentrate and Lily needs her quiet time. So, hello everyone. Thank you for showing up. I'm so happy that so many of you here. I hope you all are ready to get started. Today we are covering the How Not to Die of Diabetes, from diabetes, and How Not to Die from High Blood Pressure, which were definitely really interesting chapters since so many people suffer from these two issues. So thank you for the empathy. Yeah, it's renovating. It's been like 5 years of just constant renovations, and I'm so over it. And I don't know if you guys can hear, but he's like buzz sawing and the lights are flickering from the power draw. We're gonna get through it. We're gonna be fine. Okay. So, does anyone have anything that they would like to share before we start, just about what you guys read? Anything specific that you finally want to get covered, or anything like that? Miranda, I'm glad you're here too. Yeah. So anything in these two chapters that really stood out for you, or made a big impact in the way you've been thinking about these diseases? Hello, Sarah. I'm so glad to see everyone back. Very nice. I feel like we have a nice consistent group here. Very impressive. Personally, you know, with diabetes, my whole life I had heard about diabetes, but I never really knew that the actual damage that diabetes causes was from the high blood sugar in the bloodstream. It's actually the blood sugar that ends up damaging blood vessels that lead to your eyes, to your kidneys, to your nerves, all over like that. And it had just never occurred to me that that was the actual mechanism, and that's why it is so important to keep your blood sugars under control. Okay, Britt asks, if I'm overweight, will good fats hinder my weight loss? That's a good question, and it's a little bit hard to say. I think it's definitely important to make sure that you are still eating good sources of fats while you're still working on losing weight. So I would say, you know, some people say that you can have 5% of your calories coming from good fats. Other people, like, I tend to think that at least 10% is a better place for everyone, not just people who are trying to lose weight. But as long as you keep your percentage of calories from fats below a certain percent, I would say like 10 to 15% is a great range for someone who's trying to lose weight. That's the percentage where I was eating when I lost my weight, like 45 pounds, and it won't hinder your weight loss at all. In fact, having some good fats around can definitely keep your body ready and willing to get rid of excess fat that it's holding, you know, on the body. So don't worry about it too much. Definitely make sure that you're still getting your good fats and your omegas, because those are so important to eye health and skin health and brain health, nerve health, that kind of stuff. So don't be afraid of fat. We're definitely not talking about a non-fat diet. Britt says, so like 1 avocado a day won't hurt too much then, right? It depends on the size of the avocado. Like if you get one of our Hawaii avocados that are this big, you might want to lay off. But if it's one of those little Hass avocados that you get from the store. I wouldn't worry too much about that. I know that it can be good to vary the types of fats that you're eating from whole plant foods. So this is something that I neglected for a long time when I was eating a vegan diet. I mostly just ate avocados too. But I think it can be really important to include other sources of fat. So stuff like from flax seeds, sunflower seeds, sesame seeds, pumpkin seeds. Those are some of my favorites. Things like walnuts or almonds. They're all so healthy, and they have other nutrients in them that are really healthy too. That I think it's wise to make sure that we're just eating a wide variety of foods, right? And it can be so easy, especially if we're trying to limit the amount of fat that we eat, to only eat specific foods or our favorite types of fats like avocados. Does that make sense? Okay, hold on 1 second. I'm going to try to get the iPad there. Like, why are you staring at the ceiling when you could see more of my fantastic secondhand shirt? Okay. All right. She's type 2 diabetes, but she has a gluten intolerance. Get off gluten. Wheat, barley, oats, and rye. Carbohydrate, sugar, dried juices, pasta, eat only vegetables and eggs. Well, eggs definitely aren't indicated for diabetes, but Vanera Grace says, what are good sources of iron? Legumes are nice and high in irons. A lot of nuts and seeds are high in iron. Let's see here. Blackstrap molasses is just insanely high in iron. So that's a great way to kind of like dose yourself if you need to raise your iron levels. Make sure you get the blackstrap molasses. Oats are high in iron. Things like tomatoes, especially concentrated tomatoes, like tomato paste. If I'm trying to get a little bit of extra iron into my diet, I'll take like a can of tomato paste, a little can, and I'll put it into, say, my whole grains, like my brown rice or my whole oats or something that I'm cooking, just to increase the amount of iron that's in there. And then always make sure that you have your iron with high vitamin C foods so that it'll boost iron absorption. And then make sure that you're not having iron-rich foods with something like tea or coffee, which has compounds in them that will block the absorption of iron. Okay? All right. Hypernova says, I was just wondering if a person has gone vegan and they are morbidly super obese, will a person still have excess skin? Because people that I know who have had less excess than non-vegan okay. I think you're asking, like, if someone's vegan and they're super obese, if they lose weight, will they still have that extra skin issue? And yes, possibly. Part of it seems to be genetic. Part of it's just, like, person to person, how well their body bounces back after weight loss. There are things that you can do, like doing the dry brushing, like I do, can help. Anything to encourage, like, collagen and elastin production. So I've demonstrated a few times on my channel the massage, the type of massage that I do and did when I was losing weight to help encourage my skin to kind of bounce back from that fluctuation in weight, because I went up and down several times. So I had just a little bit of loose skin. Like, obviously I wasn't obese. I'm not trying to pretend that, I achieved this amazing thing, but doing some massage and skin manipulation with oils on a daily basis or a few times a week at least can be really helpful. Okay? All right. You never know. Okay. Yeah, with iron, it's really important. Eat it with vitamin C. Don't eat your iron-rich foods with coffee or tea. Yeah, and if you guys have more questions about specific nutrients, this is like your specific nutrient Bible. It literally it'll go through all the vitamins and minerals. They have their own chapters. And then it literally has these charts that list out a bunch of different foods, and then it indicates how many of what nutrients the foods have. So highly recommend this book. A little more light. Okay. Shall we get started in How Not to Die? Okay, so How Not to Die of Diabetes. I just want to start with this quote on page 101. Scared me a little bit. More than 20 million Americans are currently diagnosed with diabetes, a tripling of cases since 1990. At this rate, the CDC predicts that 1 in 3 Americans will be diabetic by 2050. Currently in the United States, diabetes causes about 50,000 cases of kidney failure, 75,000 lower extremity amputations, 650,000 cases of vision loss, and about 75,000 deaths every year. So all of those would be caused by the high blood sugar damaging the blood vessels all throughout our body, and the smaller the blood vessel, the more vulnerable it is to the damage from the high blood sugar. So that's why you see things like your eyes go, people get issues with the tips of their fingers, but mostly with their feet because the blood flow is so degraded, and so you end up having poor wound healing and stuff, and you know, a lot of people, older people that you see being pushed around in wheelchairs who are missing their lower limbs, that's because of diabetes. So it's not just a case of like, oh, I might have to inject with insulin or something. It's a case of your toes might fall off a little bit, and that's scary. Yeah. Okay. So do you guys know the difference? I mean, he kind of went over it in the book, but the difference between type 1 diabetes and 2 diabetes. You guys, I'll give you a couple seconds to comment, see who gets it right. Because that's important. A lot of the times you'll be talking to someone and then they'll be like, oh, well, you know, you're only talking about type 2 diabetes. You can't do anything about type 1. And that's kind of true, that type 1 diabetes is impossible to reverse, right? But you can do a lot to manage, like, as the amount of insulin or other medications that you have to take while having type 1 diabetes by changing your diet around. So it's not like it's a lost cause. You should just give up. I have type 1 diabetes. I can't do anything about it. It's more important to do your good diet then. All right. Yeah, Sarah says diabetes, it's an epidemic, and everyone acts like it's normal. I know, people just act like, oh, I got diabetes, like you picked it up off a doorknob or something, but that's unfortunately not how it goes. Yeah, Equivocal Truth says type 1 is usually viral or genetic causes. 2 is more diet related. Yeah, so type 1 can be, it's still, we're not totally positive about what the trigger is. There are ideas it could be a virus, it could be genetics, it could be certain proteins in foods that we're eating. Specifically with type 1 diabetes, one of those proteins is casein, the protein found in milk, could potentially be a trigger. Dima says, type 1 body doesn't make enough insulin. Type 2, you're insulin resistant, but still making it. Yes, absolutely. Type 1 supposedly something you're born with. Type 2 is lifestyle. Yeah, pretty much. You're born with type 1, and type 2 you get. Yeah, so it's not necessarily like, oh, you know, you're born with it and there was nothing that could have been done to prevent it. Like I said, we're still trying to understand exactly what causes the type 1 diabetes, but it appears that someone's born with a genetic predisposition for type 1 diabetes. There has to be a triggering event. Like I said, still not totally sure about what those triggering events are, but casein, the protein in milk, is thought to be one possibility where people, their small children, cow's milk or the like, you know, cow's milk formula instead of breastfeeding, and that could be the trigger. Okay. Oh, interesting. Sarah says, my coworker got type 1 diabetes in his 20s while deployed in Kuwait. Wow, that's intense. And so with the type 1 diabetes, Oh, I totally lost my train of thought. Oh yeah, type 1 diabetes, your body, it's autoimmune, so your body, your immune system actually kills off the cells in your pancreas that create insulin, so you become unable to produce insulin. With type 2 diabetes, as was said a moment ago, your body is still making insulin. In fact, it's making a lot of insulin, but the insulin isn't working. So they are really, like, to me, they're two completely different diseases, but the result is the same, and that's the high blood sugar. And that's what diabetes really means, is just that you have high blood sugar. Okay? Oh wow, Equivocal Truth says my mom got type 1 at 33 after not treating strep throat. Wow. Rheumatoid arthritis at the same time. Yeah, strep is one of those that can end up triggering some autoimmune issues. Oh no. Oh Lisa, I'm glad you're trying, but you know, there's only so much you can do if you're at the hospital trying to use their Wi-Fi, yeah? Alright. So, 95% of diabetes cases are type 2, which means 95% of diabetes cases are lifestyle related. There's a lot that we can do to prevent diabetes. I liked that quote by Dr. Greger. I'm not sure where it was, but he said, type 2 diabetes is always preventable, usually improvable, and even sometimes reversible through diet and lifestyle. So it's so important. And insulin resistance is kind of the hallmark of type 2 diabetes. So with type 2 diabetes, the main treatment is, hey, don't eat sugar, right? Well, no one can avoid all sugar and all carbohydrates, and people end up having a lot of cravings for those foods, and they end up cheating, and then they end up causing lots of problems for yourself. So what's been being learned, or I guess relearned or admitted to over the last however long, is that diabetes is really a disease of too much fat in the blood and too much fat in the muscles. So basically just too much fat in the diet altogether. So intracellular lipids, that's something that most people aren't aware of, even if they're diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. And those are fats that get built up inside your muscles. So it's totally normal to have some of them. It's just so that your muscles, which use a lot of energy, have a good energy source available to them when they need it for periods of longer amounts of activity. But when you're eating too much fat, when you become overweight, when your fat cells are already kind of packed full of excess fat, it's really common for your body to start storing that fat inside your muscles. And it's at that point that the fat inside the muscles, they start to interfere with the way that insulin works. So they have these toxic breakdown products that are, what was it, diacylglycerol, diacylglycerol, and ceramide, which are two of the toxic breakdown products of these intracellular lipids, and those interfere with the action of insulin. So that's how insulin resistance happens. Everybody thinks it's just about, oh, my body doesn't process sugar good. It's not that. The sugar aggravates the issue, but it's not the cause. So the interesting thing was that researchers found that if you have one high-fat meal, people start to experience insulin resistance, meaning their insulin doesn't work as well as it's supposed to after only 160 minutes. So it just blows me away that still we have this research around, right? We have this research around. It's been around since Dr. Greger talked about Walter Kempner several times in his fruit and rice diet. We know these things, and yet still doctors and nutritionists are telling people, oh, you have diabetes, or don't eat too much sugar. Don't eat too much sugar, you might get diabetes. Absolutely ridiculous. All right. Britt says, that quote I think is in the end of page 120, continuing on to page 121. Oh, that far in. All right. Yes, undefined user. There will be a short Q&A after the live stream. All this research, all these people that have diabetes, and yet we're still pointing the medical finger in the wrong direction. I know, Kelly, it just blows me away. It's really frustrating because some people are so disempowered about being able to treat their diabetes. And they should feel empowered. They should feel like they have other options than these medications that largely don't work. And, I've known a lot of people who have diabetes and they're on the metformin, they're on the other blood sugar control medicines, and their diabetes just keeps progressing. And they're trying to follow their doctor's orders because their doctor's orders don't make a lot of sense. Or they're trying to follow the American Diabetes Association recommendations, and I would say that, it's like they follow those recommendations like 95%, and then they want to cheat a little bit, right? And then with that combination of them kind of following a diet that's, calorie restricted and might be able to help because it's so calorie restricted, then they cheat, and that combo worsens their diabetes, and they keep getting worse and keep getting worse, and they don't understand what their doctors say by everything in moderation, which is a phrase that doesn't even really make sense. And then they're on the insulin, and then the insulin just keeps going up and getting higher and higher, and then they're just stuck with it, and then their toes start falling off, and it breaks my heart. It absolutely breaks my heart. And the thing that worried me a little bit, because I had really bad hypoglycemia when I was growing up, so I was on my way to insulin resistance, is that pre-diabetes, excuse me, I'm all frazzled because I've been, stressed out all day, but I'm trying to get my act together. Pre-diabetes, you're already having damage to your blood vessels when you're in a pre-diabetic state instead of, the cutoff for diabetes, blood sugar-wise, is pretty erroneous. So research has found that people are still experiencing damage to their blood vessels even when they're pre-diabetic. So you don't even have to have a diabetes diagnosis in order to be experiencing damage from diabetes in your eyes, in the capillaries in your extremities, in your kidneys. It's really worrisome. And so something that's a little bit controversial nowadays, especially in this age of body acceptance, which kind of turns into fat acceptance, which ends up assuring people that your blood sugar levels are fine, or, oh yeah, your cholesterol is normal, and you're 50 or 100 pounds overweight, and you're fine, you're perfectly healthy. You're one of those metabolically healthy, obese people, right? But still yet, with diabetes, the tightest correlation is with obesity. So I think he quoted in here 90%, here on page 106, it says 90% of those who develop diabetes are overweight. And I think it's unwise to deny that or to try to spin statistics in order to support our hope that people who are overweight can and still remain healthy throughout their lives. But the research and the evidence just doesn't yeah. And Britt says I'm freaking obese by 1 point. And I totally believe that BMI isn't perfect. It definitely doesn't account for muscle mass, so if you're working out and stuff and you have plenty of muscle on you and you're carrying some fat as well, your BMI isn't going to be 100% accurate. So it can be easy for someone who's not really overweight or obese to come up as overweight or obese, but that that logic tends to get abused by a lot of people who overestimate the amount of muscle that they're carrying and underestimate the amount of fat that they're carrying. So again, it's like if you're working on diet and you're working on losing weight, or you're just working on being healthy and then letting the weight loss be kind of a natural side effect of healthy eating, then like don't stress about BMI too much. But BMI is realistically pretty effective and really statistically helpful for gathering data about large groups of people. So a high BMI is strongly correlated with the development of diabetes. Yeah, like 5X Disney fan says, I'm overweight but working on it. Looking forward to not being overweight anymore. Yeah, and it takes time, you know. You don't have to freak out about it or anything, but it does take time to get within that healthy range, and you can be healthy before you get into that range. Don't stress out about it, but it's important to put effort into getting into a healthier weight range or BMI status, right? Okay. Yeah, and he quoted a lot of like compared omnivores and vegetarians in this chapter, which I really enjoyed, but I can't wait until studies start to come out that are studying people who are really truly on whole foods, plant-based diets. I feel like that would bring up some really interesting statistical comparisons to look at, because even even the studies that are just looking at vegans, it's like that could be a junk food vegan. You never really know. They could be surviving off Oreos and Coca-Cola and just bringing us all down with their statistics. But I look forward to the whole food plant-based studies that I hope are going to come out. And two, just to try to add to the scientific evidence, there's this national weight loss registry that is run, I can't remember who runs it. I might try to find it and then put a link in the description box later. And they send out surveys every now and then. And since, I think if you lose more than 30 pounds and keep it off for a year or something, you can sign up. So I signed up 2 or 3 years ago, and they send me a survey every now and then, and every time they send me this survey, you fill out everything, you talk about your dietary habits, and then they have a little open comment section. So I always make sure in the open comment section to say, I lost this much weight, I did it on a whole plant food diet, I didn't calorie restrict, and I've maintained my weight, and I feel really healthy and feeling really good. And, who knows, maybe it'll spur a change. Maybe it'll spur a change one day in what they recommend, because right now most people recommend, calorie deficits and eating everything in moderation. So, you know. There was also this spillover effect that I feel like, I feel like it's true. I don't feel like it was put there intentionally to scare people who are overweight, but I feel like you could definitely do that. He says several times that even if you're eating a healthy diet, if you are quite obese, there can be the spillover effect where body fat spills out of your adipocytes, your fat cells, and then gets fat into your bloodstream, which can cause symptoms of insulin resistance, basically. And it's another one of those things that I feel like is true, but also a little bit disheartening for a lot of people who read it. And I do question what it would be like for someone on a whole plant food diet who's, eating one avocado a day or something like that, and trying to reduce their amount of fat. I do wonder if that would have an effect, if your body would be much more able to handle any spillover that's coming into the bloodstream from that. So again, I just don't think you should freak out about it. It's a little bit like, but I want perfect blood sugar regulation now. I feel you. But, that can also be a reason why it's so tough to it can be tough for some people when they're transitioning to start to feel better. It can take a little while. You know, your body has to clean house and stuff. And there was something else, I don't think he mentioned it he mentioned it kind of sideways, but it gave me a thought. I might be getting ahead of myself. But when you're losing weight, you know, a lot of stuff gets stored in your body fat. Vitamin D is one. It's a fat-soluble vitamin, so a lot gets stored away. I think vitamin A can be stored as well, but don't quote me on that. I'm not positive about it. And then things like PCBs and dioxins and a bunch of other environmental contaminants can get kind of stuffed away in body fat as well. And I've heard theories on this. I haven't heard a lot of good, solid scientific information, but I wonder when it comes to weight loss if the body isn't purposefully slowing weight loss down to prevent your body either being flooded by vitamin D or flooded by PCBs or flooded by dioxins or any other whatever that's stored up in your body fat. So I do wonder if your body purposefully slows that weight loss down so that you don't get kind of overdosed, right? Hold on, I'm gonna try to. I feel like I sit on this chair and I just feel like it slowly sinks me down lower and lower until I'm like a little head peeking up over the screen. Yeah. Yeah, and Sarah says as well, your body might do that so that you don't get like a crazy awful detox experience if you're losing weight and then your body is just flooded with these chemicals or vitamins that it can't handle too much of. And since fat-soluble vitamins, now I'm too high, since fat-soluble vitamins can't be cleared out of the body very easily, that's definitely something to consider. And that's another reason why some people who are overweight or obese, they're like chronically low in vitamin D, and that's because their vitamin D just keeps going into their fat stores instead of being used. And so they end up with huge amounts of vitamin D stored away, not much in their bloodstream, and they keep coming back as vitamin D deficient. Okay, so obviously since BMI and weight is so correlated with diabetes, something that's important is losing weight. In fact, I'll just answer this right quick. Britt says, what has vitamin D in it? So you get vitamin D from the sun predominantly. That's where you want to get it. There are a lot of vitamin D fortified foods out there. So I think they fortify cow's milk and a bunch of other animal foods. You can get vitamin D from eating mushrooms that have been exposed to the sun. And you can get vitamin D from eating lichen off of trees, if you want to be that person. Or, yes, some tanning beds count. It depends what UV spectrum they have on there. Generally speaking, it'll say if it's able to produce vitamin D from those tanning beds. They'll tell you. But it's best. Tanning beds aren't safe. I don't recommend those at all. So I think it's best to try to get your vitamin D from responsible sun exposure. You know, you don't need much. Us white people don't need a lot of sun exposure to be able to produce our vitamin D. But if you live in the northern hemisphere where you don't get enough good sun exposure all year round, it's not a terrible idea to supplement. You can get lots of sun exposure or enough sun exposure during the summertime, and then your body does store that away in your fat to be used when it needs it. But if you have a guaranteed diagnosed vitamin D deficiency that won't go up from responsible sun exposure, then it's not a terrible idea to supplement. But I agree with plant-based doctors who say not to supplement with huge amounts of supplements, you know. Don't overdose yourself with the stuff. Don't take mega doses of it. Take a reasonable amount consistently until your levels go up, and then you can consider not supplementing anymore once your levels are up. Okay? Okay. So weight loss on a vegan diet, I believe, is what we were talking about, is extremely important. I might have gotten ahead. Oh, I know. You guys, I'm so sorry. I'm like so freaking frazzled today. I've been walking. Now's not the time, Lily. Get it together. Come on. So, saturated fat as well. Saturated fat comes mostly from animal foods. There are small amounts of saturated fat in plant foods. You don't have to freak out about it. But saturated fat predominantly from animal foods can cause lipotoxicity, in that it gets into your cells and it interferes with the way that your mitochondria function. And your mitochondria are the parts of your cells, they're little organelles that produce all of the ATP for your body. And ATP is what energy is, essentially. So the interesting thing that I've read about this before, that saturated fat can be toxic to mitochondria. And since mitochondrial dysfunction is potentially tied into adrenal fatigue, I really wondered about that, especially for myself as well, when I was eating a paleo-style diet and I kept having issues with adrenal fatigue and I just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And I wonder if that wasn't because my mitochondria just weren't functioning properly after eating so much darn saturated fat. And it appears as well that saturated fat can build up in the cellular membranes, and that's since, that's where insulin and sugar interface with your cell, is through that membrane. It can interfere in the way that insulin is absorbed. So when we're talking about diabetes and insulin resistance, it's not just one cause. It seems to be multifactorial, coming from these really high-fat animal foods like, meat, eggs, dairy, fish. They're really high in fat, and it appears that they're causing issues with the intramicellular lipids. They're causing issues with the cellular membrane dysfunction, and they're potentially causing issues with our mitochondria. So it's worrisome. And there's one more way that they really screw with you, and that's that saturated fat appears to be toxic to the beta cells of the pancreas. So beta cells in your pancreas, they are the ones that produce insulin. And what was it? I didn't write down what page this was on, but they said that by the time people are diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, it appears that upwards of 50% of their beta cells in their pancreas are dead. So that means that those other 50% are really having to pump out a lot of insulin, and there's no guarantees how much longer they'll be working. And that means that once those beta cells are dead, then I don't suppose it would be autoimmune, so I'm not sure if it would technically count as type 1 diabetes, but you're in the same situation as a type 1 diabetic who can no longer produce their own insulin. Okay? So, it appears that one of the most important things would be to get rid of animal foods with diabetes. And I really wonder why more doctors don't talk about this. They don't talk about plant-based diets, because not only does it appear that plant-based diets could prevent the progression of diabetes and insulin resistance by affecting, the intramicellular lipids, the integrity of the cellular membrane, the health of the beta cells in the pancreas, but plant-based diets are also one of the most effective ways to lose weight, and that is what I was about to talk about a minute ago. So, losing weight, why are whole plant foods so effective? So, wonderful Dr. Greger, he has on page 109 through page 113, he talks about weight loss on plant-based diets. So they're so effective, basically, I would say most simply, because of caloric density, right? Sarah, that's a good point. When I say, why don't doctors talk about this, she says, because they'd have to practice weight. Yeah. I don't think most docs are even aware that plant-based diets can help. Yeah, and it's crazy. That's crazy. That's why we need nutrition education in freaking medical schools. So, caloric density, I'm sure we're all aware of this, and if you guys, watch my videos, I preach on this stuff a lot, where, plant foods are really high in fiber, and water. And that makes them bulky. They fill up our stomachs. And in order to feel happy and satiated and content with life, you need a full stomach at least a couple days, right? And so are you going to fill up that stomach with like meat and dairy and eggs or refined oils or refined carbohydrates, which are very calorically dense, meaning that they contain a lot of calories compared to their volume? Or are you going to fill up your stomach and get pleasantly satiated and content through whole plant foods, which have low calories compared to their volume? And Dr. Greger has that great little, well, maybe it's not a great picture. It's really actually quite a low quality picture over there, where he demonstrates like a plate of 100 of calories of each food. You know, the cheese is minuscule. It's absolutely ridiculous. But that's part of why plants are so effective at weight loss. The other reason is one of the few post-it tags that my book got. I started to post-it tag this book, and then I was like, I'm just going to have to do it every single page. But this really stood out because I have the quote on page 113. Let me make sure that I'm getting it. Yeah, so the quote on 113, those who eat plant-based diets may have an 11% higher resting metabolic rate. And I can definitely attest that this feels like it's true. I remember when I was eating paleo and I felt like I just looked at food and I would get fatter. And now I feel like I can, I eat pretty healthy most of the time, but it's like I go out and I eat a giant vegan ice cream cone and I don't notice it. Used to, it's like I would look at an ice cream cone and I would get fatter the next day. So that means vegetarians could be burning more calories even in their sleep. Why? This could be because vegetarians have a higher gene expression of a fat-burning enzyme called carnitine palmitoyltransferase, which effectively shovels fat into the mitochondrial furnaces of your cells. I think that's why bodybuilders supplement with carnitine. They're trying to get that done, but it just doesn't work. I want to check in with your comments in just 1 second. Sorry. So, this could be why, further down on page 113, the largest study ever to investigate meat and body weight found that meat consumption was associated with significant weight gain even after adjusting for calories. So that means that even though people are eating the same number of calories, it appears the person eating more meat would, on average, gain significantly more weight. So, that's really important because even when you put people on really low calorie or calorie restricted diets to try to get them to lose weight, which, calorie restricted diets never work long term because people can't stick to them. Your body's not going to let you starve to death. But even if you're on a calorie restricted diet that includes animal products, it looks like weight loss isn't going to be as effective. And so, people always act like eating a vegan diet is some kind of horrible deprivation, but it's just not. It's just not. You get to eat more food. You get to actually feel satiated, and you get to lose more weight, and your health is protected. Okay, I'm going to check in with your comments right quick. Kelly says, I still calorie count, but it's to make sure I'm actually getting enough calories. I have a tendency to eat too few. Yeah, it's an amazing change in the way that your brain works when you go from like, oh no, what am I going to eat? It's too many calories, to like, what am I going to eat to make sure I get enough calories? Alright? AL says, did anybody ever feel dizzy after eating seafood? I can't remember eating seafood, so... Alright. I'm lucky my doc just checked my thyroid, liver, kidney, B12, cholesterol, all came back great. B12 was a bit high. Oh, interesting. But he told me to keep doing what I'm doing because it's working. That's awesome news. Oh, sorry, I got like between boob sweat, you guys. Oh man. It's like deceptively hot today. I don't know why I put this t-shirt on. Alright, I feel like I'm a little off track with the... I don't know what's going on. Trade me weather. Yeah, I could use like 5 winter days in a row, and then I think I'd be good. But just 5. I don't want more than that. Okay. Oh, how did I get into Parkinson's? Okay, sorry. Skipped ahead in my book there for a second. Okay. Which brings us to the idea, another idea that we talk about with weight loss a lot, which is bariatric surgeries now are becoming very popular. And I've gotten a lot of comments from people who have undergone bariatric surgeries. And it really breaks my heart for them because I get a lot of stories like my doctor said that this was the only option for me. Because we tried diets, and diets didn't work because calorie restrictive don't work. And so they said that it was the only option. I had it done. You know, I'm 16, I'm 18, I'm 25, I'm 30 years old, and I lost some weight, but now I'm gaining it all back, and whenever I try to eat real food, I get sick. I've had several people, and, you know, it's like, it's hard to say was this accurate reporting or not, but they say the only food that I can eat and feel okay is chocolate ice cream, or some kind of super sweet, easy to digest food. And then they're stuck taking tons of nutrition supplements, and they're still gaining weight, and their stomach is this big, and they're constantly having acid reflux. Although I'm not sure there's that much stomach acid to burp up, but the food keeps coming up anyway. They have to deal with nutrient deficiencies, and it's some of the worst problem solving in medical history, I think. Surely there are some people who have had great success with these surgeries. Usually it's short-term success. But it's just... it blows me away and it breaks my heart because then people get to a point where you either can't or it's really difficult to get them on a real food diet, a diet that contains fiber and plenty of plant foods, those foods that are going to nourish them and actually help them to lose weight, and they just can't get it, and it makes me so mad, and it breaks my heart. I am kind of curious why Dr. Garth Davis, the author of Proteinaholic, he's a bariatric surgeon. And I'm kind of curious as to why he's actually still doing it. But it's like dietary change is so much more effective than bariatric surgery. And yes, Kelly just said it should be the absolute very last option, and I so agree, but more often than not now, it's not the last option. It's one of the first things that people talk about with their patients because doctors just think that their patients won't listen, which is fair, because the advice that they've been giving for so long doesn't work, but anyway, interestingly, studies have shown that eating a plant-based diet, a whole food plant-based diet, is just as effective as fasting, like literal starvation. You can starve yourself for a week and your diabetes will go away. If you go back to eating the same foods, it'll just return immediately. But it appears that by eating a whole plant food diet that is low in fat, you can reverse your diabetes in much the same way in many cases. It's not guaranteed that you can reverse your diabetes, but a lot of people have been able to get rid of their diabetes, get off all medication. Most other people who go on a plant-based diet are able to drastically lower their medication to a point where the medication doesn't have as many side effects and isn't as life-threatening. So it's really something to think about. Yeah, here's a quote from How Not to Die about gastric bypass. He says, this is on page 115. He says, amazingly, they found that the diet alone worked better than the surgery, even in the same group of patients. The subject's blood sugar control was better in the absence of the operation. This means that the benefits of surgery may be obtained without you ever having to go under the knife and getting your internal organs rearranged. So that's really interesting. The subject's blood sugar control was better in the absence of the operation. So, gosh, who would have thought that your body actually works better when it's not cut into pieces? Hello? Alright. Hold on 1 second. Going through the comments to check in with you guys. I feel like you guys get your own awesome conversations going in here, and I'm just trying to keep up. Demon says, I don't understand why anyone would think that surgery to remove your ability to digest food is the answer. Yeah, absolutely. That's a great way to put it. It makes no sense. Your body would be designed to make you fail. Yeah. Yeah, it's like being able to digest food, absorb and assimilate nutrients. It's just like, drives me crazy. Breaks my heart. Alright. Even long, yeah. Oh, that's cool. Going vegan cured my asthma. Woohoo! I was so excited when I went fully plant-based that it was like a slap in the face. The extreme amount of negativity and crap I got. I know it is also surprising the amount of negativity that you get, especially from the medical community when you go in and you say, oh, hey, I'm vegan, and they're like, I don't know about that. A lot of doctors anyway. Some doctors are waking up, and I'm really happy for that. All right. Demon says, anyone ever notice that if you post something vegan-related Facebook page, no matter how innocuous, people tend to mysteriously ignore it? Yes, I've noticed that. I kind of wonder, algorithm isn't like secretly arranged to shush that stuff, but I don't know. Alright. Sounds like it's cold on the mainland. Alright. And then that brings us to the neuropathy part. This was another one of those things like last year, what was it, hiatal hernia, where your stomach like blows through your diaphragm into your chest cavity, where a lot of people are dealing with this, and we had, I had no idea, diabetic neuropathy, people who are just in like chronic nerve pain and trying to live with that uncontrollably, taking tons of painkillers, opioids, muscle relaxers to try to deal with this stuff. And again, it's one of those things that just blows me away, because this study that Dr. Greger was talking about showed that people who were on tons of drugs, painkillers and such, people were actually able to reverse their neuropathy within days on a plant-based diet. So that's days, and they're not in chronic pain anymore. And that blows me away. It absolutely blows me away. The thing that, something else that kind of scared me was when he talks about the trans fats that are lodged in our skin and how those could be causing inflammation and damage to all of those blood vessels and such. And that kind of grossed me out, because, like, I know I used to eat a lot of trans fats. Like, my mom was a big Crisco baker. My dad was always a health freak, so he got us onto margarine, right? Because margarine was really healthy in the 80s and 90s. And so, the whole family was eating tons of trans fats. And then my dad wanted to go on a super low-fat diet. And so he started asking my mom to cook low fat. And she used to mash Crisco and lard into his food when he wasn't looking, and then serve it to him. That's just just to take a little moment to talk about what I grew up with. So, neuropathy. Yeah, talking about chronic pain that you want to get out of. My poor dad. Oh god. And getting rid of those trans fats. So, alright, any other questions or comments about the diabetes section that we wanted to talk about? Anything? Sweating like a pig. Oh. Lily, I had a question about blood pressure. Mine was 122/70. Is that white coat syndrome? Oh, you just get nervous when you go in? Or is it possibly caused from added salt? That's a good question. Like 122/70 isn't terrible, and it's not so super high that I would think it would be a big deal. I don't think it's something that you really need to stress out about, so to speak, but it could definitely be the white coat syndrome. I know every time I go into my dentist's office, my blood pressure is like 10 to 15 points higher than it is when I'm at home, and I have one of those little blood pressure monitoring cuffs that I use. I would say that today, after the frazzled day that I had, my blood pressure is probably like 180. But it's probably white coat syndrome, but it could have to do with the salt, and we'll get to that a lot in the blood pressure section right here. Just want to check in and make sure. Sarah says we need a revolution when it comes to type 2 diabetes. We really need to re-educate. That's absolutely true. People need to feel empowered to actually be able to deal with themselves. To be able to deal with their bodies and take care of themselves. Yeah. Okay, so we'll move on to blood pressure, if that is alright with everyone. So, this is definitely something that vegans can still deal with because of the sodium intake. And sodium, hold on one second, you guys. We got a lot of wind and rain coming. I'm going to close the window. Woo, hold up. Sorry, I usually love my wind chimes, but not when I'm live streaming. Okay. Okay. So I know that sodium is something that challenges and confuses me because I did a completely no sodium diet for at least 9 months. No salt. Felt okay. I always had really intense salt cravings. I always waited for them to go away. They never did. And part of that, I believe, was the adrenal imbalance that I was dealing with, where your adrenal glands are perched on top of your kidneys, and together they produce hormones that regulate how much fluid and electrolytes are in your blood. Okay? So, if your kidneys or adrenal glands aren't working as well as they're supposed to, if they're perhaps not able to produce as much hormones as they need, such as if your adrenals are fatigued or you've been chronically stressed out and kind of worn your adrenal glands out, if you have adrenal exhaustion, like I did, it can be difficult to regulate how much salt is in your body. So, salt is still my primary craving. I don't have a sweet tooth anymore because I eat so much fruit and carbohydrates. That just pretty much went away. But I definitely do crave salt, and I find that I'm really dissatisfied with my food if I don't eat a seasoned meal. I could eat 5 bowls of beans and rice and not feel satisfied and be like super disgustingly full and feeling like I'm gonna, projectile vomit everywhere. If it's not seasoned, I won't feel satiated. So I found that personally eating salt is important for my satiation and for my life satisfaction in general. I would love to reduce the amount of salt that I'm eating because of some of the stuff that Dr. Greger went over in this chapter, right? But I don't look forward to trying to do that. So what I do in my diet is I don't cook with salt. I don't really add much salt to my food when I'm cooking it. I try not to add salt, like at the table, but I do use a little bit of tamari or, soy sauce, Bragg's liquid aminos, coconut aminos, whatever you want to use and call it. They're all pretty darn salty. So, when I keep track of it and I add it up, I eat about 1,500 milligrams of sodium per day, and that's still quite low, comparatively speaking. But say I eat something like tortilla chips, then my salt intake is going to go through the roof like crazy. Okay, I'll see you. Love you too. Bye. I don't think Levi's going to come in and say hi today. We've been snapping at each other. Well, not even snapping at each other, but we've both been very stressed out. Oh, Petunia, did you get stuck inside? Come here. Come, honey. Come. So I do wonder about my blood pressure and my salt intake because, like I said, when I go to the dentist, my blood pressure is always quite high, or when I go to the doctor, my blood pressure is, about 120/80 or thereabouts. And that's higher than I would like it to be. I'd like to be one of those, hardcore, super awesome vegans with the super low blood pressure and the super low cholesterol, but genetically speaking and because of my salt intake, I might not get there. So, do we have any amazing low blood pressure, stellar, amazing lovelies who have that super low blood pressure that everybody covets? No? Anybody? Let me know if you guys know what your equivocal truth. 85/55. Ooh, we got a 98/60. Brits 120/84. Girl, I'm there with you. Hypernova 110/65. That's good. Sarah 110/90. That's good. Glow B, we got 90/60. 122/70. Okay-ish. Lols. Ooh, now you're just bragging. Equivocal Truth says, my resting heart rate is 45, too. Mine's not that low. Got a 90/60 from Meggie. Got 95/60 from the Precious Egg. You don't like? Interesting. Yeah. So, it says 120/80 or more is kind of counted as pre-hypertensive, and 140/90 is official hypertension. And then the ideal, or thereabouts, like they come to the ideal by this blood pressure is great and you don't get any benefit by going lower, even though you can. That ideal blood pressure is 110/70. Okay, hold on. Okay, go outside. Go. Okay. And then apparently babies are born with 95/60. So, there's that. And, as Dr. Greger details, the issues with high blood pressure are very scary. The one that worries me the most is aneurysm. Like, if I die, I don't know. I'd like to die when I'm old and in my sleep, whatever. But it scares me to think about, just standing there and being like, ow, my head hurts, and then you're dead. So, we're going to try not to have an aneurysm. Although I feel like today, do you guys have those moments? I don't know if I just stress myself out too much or whatever, but it's like, you're standing in Target and you just need to buy that one thing, and you got it, and you're standing there, and then there's the person who goes through the express layout, and they're like, oh no, this was supposed to be on sale. Can I get a rain check and apply for a Target red card? And I just feel my blood pressure going up, and I'm about to have a stroke. I'm just have to... Like, I can feel it now. I don't know if I'm getting older or what, but... Okay. Speaking of people who have never had to deal with that, I was really intrigued by the part on the Yanomamo Indians in the Amazon who've, never had processed foods or anything. And their BP is at about 100/60 for life. So they get old, BP stays the same. It was the same thing with those Kenyans. Their blood pressure stays at like 110/70 for their whole life. So high blood pressure as you get older is definitely something that doesn't need to happen. And as someone who's not super old yet, I'd like to not have an aneurysm, but I'm mostly worried about the health of my skin, So the thing about sodium that really got me was that when you eat the sodium, it decreases the blood flow to your skin. And it decreases the activity of a key antioxidant enzyme, which helps to protect your skin from oxidation and damage. It appears that salt may also be an oxidant, so that's my primary concern right now, is my skin. Let's see, Britt says, my dad told me about the Fukarwe Indians. Sorry. They're really short, and every so often you see them jump over the grass and say, fuck her away. That's an interesting side note. Yeah, and you guys remind me to talk about the daily dozens in a few minutes, because getting all your daily dozens can be a bit of an issue. So anyway, with the sodium, the thing that's really promising for me is that 3/4 of sodium in the standard Western diet comes from processed foods. So if you get rid of those foods, you're not as exposed to sodium. The other source was chicken, and I found that kind of appalling, was how much salty water they pump into chicken to try to make it heavier so they can, get more money when they sell you those chickens. And then the other place is where salt kind of sneaks in and you don't even realize it, places like bread. And if you if you look at the nutrition facts of bread, it's really quite appalling how much sodium they put in bread in order to make it taste really yummy. And like Dr. Greger went over his general guideline, and I've heard this from several other plant-based doctors, is to look at the nutrition facts and look at the sodium, and if the sodium is higher than the serving size, you shouldn't eat it. Right? Does that make sense? So if you look at it and the serving size is 100 grams, it should have 100 milligrams milligrams of sodium or less. Does that make sense? And that's for processed foods. That's for foods that come with a label, which are the sodium-rich foods anyway. All right. Lana says, why is 80% of the bread nowadays with honey? Who needs their bread to be sweet? Is this only a thing in the U.S.? That's a good question. It's, adding sugar to things just brings out the flavor in general, right? So people add to bread specifically a lot of sugar and a lot of salt in order to get people to eat more, and it adds weight, which is cheap. Now with honey specifically, that's mostly just a trend. People associate honey with being a health food. A lot of people like to claim that, honey doesn't affect your blood sugar poorly, and honey is antimicrobial, so it's good for you. And they say that without actually really understanding what they're saying. Now the interesting thing is that a lot of the honey coming out from China is that it's mixed with rice syrup, which is actually vegan. So, I don't know. A lot of the fake honey is coming out. Has anyone watched the Rotten on Netflix, the new show? They had a bit about honey. It was really interesting. Yeah. Sylvia says, what do you think about maple syrup? I think, my personal opinion, maple syrup makes my blood sugar go crazy. If I taste it, like, I feel my blood sugar rocket up and then it drops. It can be a really yummy addition to your oatmeal or something like that. It's one of those foods that I use to encourage me to eat more of a healthy food. It can be great as a component to salad dressings. So if you're going to be using a sweetener, maple syrup is definitely a decent option as a sweetener. My other favorites are date sugar or just dates and coconut sugar. I do, after becoming more aware of the way that maple syrup is produced, I do kind of question whether or not it's vegan. I mean, I know that an animal wasn't involved, but the way that they take so much from those trees, and I get it that the trees survive, but it just feels kind of icky. I don't know. But then we're getting into a whole thing about plants have feelings and what am I actually going to eat? Anyway, blood pressure. Back to blood pressure. Okay. And, I want to kind of rearrange the way that he went through this stuff. Okay. So, what can we do about our blood pressure? You know, on a plant-based diet to even get it down lower. I don't know how many of you guys are having hibiscus tea on a regular basis. You guys let me know down below. I like to have my hibiscus tea probably, I would say 3 or 4 times a week. I enjoy some hibiscus tea. Yeah, Dima, you get your hibiscus. It is really good. Dr. Greger does have, I believe it was a blog post or an article that someone referred me to, talking about the potential for, I think it was aluminum in hibiscus tea, and that you can, like, max out your daily intake of aluminum if you have more than a quart of hibiscus tea per day. I'm not sure how much that would be of loose leaf hibiscus brewed, especially if you're eating the leaves like I tend to. But that's something to be aware of. Again, it's like another food, another potent food that, is it good to take huge amounts of it every single day? Yeah, maybe not. But can we have it on a regular basis? We don't have to get obsessive about always having it. We don't have to be obsessive about avoiding it. It's just something to be aware of. You know, we don't have to mega dose ourselves with hibiscus tea. But if you want to have smaller amounts of hibiscus tea on a regular basis, which I do, and I think is a great idea, then hibiscus tea is actually proven through a study at Tufts University to be quite effective at significantly lowering blood pressure in pre-hypertensive adults. So I think that was a little bit more. Yeah, so in these studies, a different study, they did 2 cups of strong hibiscus tea every morning using a total of 5 tea bags, and it was very effective at lowering subjects' blood pressure it was just as effective of the drug captopril, which is taken twice a day. However, obviously, I'm on page 136, by the way. However, there are differences. Captopril can have side effects, most commonly rash, cough, and taste impairment, and can even, though extremely rarely, cause fatal swelling of the throat. Yikes. So, I think I'll take a tiny bit of potential aluminum exposure as a trade-off for the hibiscus tea. And you know, I haven't taken my blood pressure since I started drinking hibiscus more regularly. Who knows? Maybe it's lower. Okay, Britt, bye. Thank you for joining us. Yeah. The other foods that can be really effective at managing our blood pressure are foods that are rich in nitric oxide. And nitric oxide is what they give you when you go to the hospital with like chest pains or something with really high blood pressure. They'll give you the nitric oxide to help your arteries relax and thus reduce your blood pressure. So the interesting thing is that we don't have to take it in drugs. We can get it through food. And one of the most potent sources is beets. But he does have this great list on page 138 of foods that are high in nitric oxide. So number 1 was arugula, then you got rhubarb and cilantro. I love cilantro, so I have a ton of cilantro. Butterleaf lettuce, mesclun greens, basil, beet greens, oak leaf lettuce, Swiss chard, and beets. You know, it's nice to see lettuce on a list for something for a change. Usually the lists are all dominated by kale, but anyway. Miranda says, with hibiscus, I've been hesitant because I've heard it causes fertility issues. Oh, I haven't heard that. And I'm also one of those people who's like, fertility issues? Yes, please. I'm not a fan of being fertile, but I understand that other people are. So, I'm curious what your all's consumption of these types of foods is like, because I could be more regular with beets, I guess. I tend to avoid them because they're also really high in oxalates, which, you know, can bind to other minerals and be an issue with kidney stones and stuff. If you have kidney stones, it's really not something that you have to worry about hugely. But after the last couple of chapters of How Not to Die, I feel like I need to get back onto the beet bandwagon. Maybe I'll send my favorite farmers a text and see if they can send me beets. So, I also, I can't do arugula. It's just a little too spicy for me. Kelly says she loves arugula, but she can't afford rhubarb, and she despises cilantro because it tastes like soap. Oh, poor thing. I feel like there are some places in the world where you literally can't get rid of your rhubarb. Like, you can't give it to your neighbors because they're like, nope, I have enough. But I do love the rhubarb when I used to have it, but I've never seen it here in Hawaii. Sylvia loves cilantro. I love the cilantro too. Glow B says, I can eat a whole box of arugula plain. Wow. That's love. That's true love. I can't touch the stuff. Maggie says, I could eat beets every damn day. Yeah, girl. Ah, there we go. We got another cilantro lover. Yeah, I think cilantro is my favorite herb, too. I also heard that it can help to, what was the word they used? Like, chelate radiation and remove it from your body. So that's why I include it so much, being so close to Fukushima and the state of the world. Anyway, I was also really interested with the doping with beet juice part. I remember reading this before, and I remember I went on a trail run with Levi one day, and I was like, oh, let's drink beet juice before. It'll be a great day. But I must have missed the part where they said it was like 2 to 3 hours before you exercise is the best thing to do, because we drank it like right before, and then we were about to throw up beets for the whole run, and it was not a good look. So, 2 to 3 hours before consuming beet juice, and I bet you could just have, yeah, you can just have beets too. Beets or beet juice before a sports competition or when you want to work out, and apparently it boosts your, what does it do? Nitrates, concentrated in green leafy vegetables and beets, not only help deliver oxygenated blood to your muscles by helping dilate your arteries, but they also enable your body to extract more energy from that oxygen, something never before thought possible. And that's some big stuff. 5X Disney fans, what's bad for your teeth? I know you told me your name last week too. Is it Carly? I can't remember. I'm so bad with names. I'm sorry. Because nature is far more complex than arrogant gene editing scientists would like you to believe. Yes. I've never heard that cilantro is bad for your teeth. I'll have to Google that and see what comes up. Okay. So that is about it for the blood pressure. The last thing I wanted to talk about was what Dr. Greger brought up so many times was, again, as with diabetes, like, if the science is so clear, why why aren't doctors recommending this to their patients? I just don't. It seems criminal to me that people would be put on medications that have such horrendous side effects without ever being talked to about their diet. It seems criminal to me that doctors are able to go throughout their entire professional lives without learning anything about nutrition. It's just, it breaks my heart. And even Dr. Greger, he brought up this one case about, it'll just take me a moment to find it, but Dr. Sachs, who works for Harvard University, and he said that some of this blood pressure observed in industrialized countries have been documented in strict vegetarians. And yet, he formulated this diet to lower blood pressure, and it's basically just a tweaked standard American diet. And it just blows me away. And I love that Dr. Greger has this quote on page 131 where he says, instead of simply telling you what the science shows and then letting you make up your own mind, experts patronize the population by advocating what they think is practical rather than ideal. By making the decision for you, they undermine those willing to make even greater changes for optimal health. And I feel like whatever you tell people, they're going to do it half-assed, you know? So it's like if you try to pander to them and you patronize them, as Dr. Greger says, and you tell them, oh no, this is all you have to do, do this and you'll be fine. And yet, if they did do that, they still won't be fine. But they're not going to do that. They're only going to do it half-assed. Whereas if you tell them, no, if you go on a plant-based diet and you lower your sodium to less than 1,500 milligrams per day, then you'll be okay. And if you give them that, they'll probably still half-ass it, but at least they would be better off than they were in the first place. So, I'm just so unimpressed that the ideas of diets that are low in animal foods and low in salt being able to control and prevent high blood pressure, and yet it's just not honestly acknowledged or admitted. And I guarantee you that most patients who go into their doctor's offices and say, oh, hey, I want to get my blood pressure down naturally, they'll just be like, DASH diet, whatever, and that's it. Breaks my damn heart. Okay, guys, so for next week, I'll check in with the comments in just 1 second, but for next week, I'm gonna make it a big week because these are fairly short chapters. We're gonna do 3 chapters: how not to die from liver disease, how not to die from blood cancers, and how not to die from kidney disease. They're not too long. They're all about, 10 to 14 pages each, so you should be fine with that. And, yeah, does anyone else have anything to add about blood pressure? I feel like there was a discussion about GMOs going on in here. I saw a question about organic tofu as well. Someone asking if that was okay to eat. I've done some videos about the safety of soy, So, always question how I want to frame this. So, soy foods, especially whole soy foods and or unprocessed soy foods, are fine in general. So ideally you would be eating like a whole soybean or something like tempeh, but I understand that tofu, especially organic tofu, is so delicious. And if you want to have organic tofu, and if organic tofu really lights up your life, then by all means, enjoy it. When soybeans are processed for tofu, you end up removing about, half the nutrition and goodness, but soybeans are still so healthy that it's still a very health-promoting food at that point. Now, tofu can be a little bit high in fat, and aware of in that I don't really want to OD on fatty foods. Like, I like to eat a lower fat diet just because that's how I feel best, but it can be a little bit easy to kind of creep up on your fat percentage from eating a lot of tofu. The worries about soy foods causing breast cancers and such are really unfounded, and I do have a fairly recent video about that topic if you want more information. Okay. Oh, Maggie, I'm so glad you could make it here too. Thank you so much for showing up. And I see a lot of GMO activity, I think. Okay, here's one about what we were talking about. Kelly says, does the sodium naturally occurring in plants affect blood pressure in the same way as the sodium in salt? I would say that if it was in large enough quantities, it probably would. But the amount of sodium that's in whole plant foods is fairly small, and it's so important for us to remember that sodium is absolutely vital to our health and well-being. If we get too low in sodium, we can have some major trouble. I think, your heart stopping, which is a big deal. So our bodies do need some sodium, so we're not trying to get rid of all sodium. It's great to get a lot of that sodium from whole plant foods, and then some from added salts. Excuse me, especially if, we're sweating a lot. Like, when I use the sauna, I usually put a couple of grains of salt in my water bottle just to make sure that my sodium levels stay about where they need to be, because I do eat a lower sodium diet, and my body isn't that good at regulating fluids and such, I guess, just because of the adrenal issues that I have had in the past. So definitely don't worry about sodium that's in whole plant foods. You want that. Are you still doing a live stream dedicated to female issues? I definitely can in the future. I do have some videos coming up where I wanted to talk more about dealing with lady stuff. Okay. I'm just looking for some comments that are more to do with the blood pressure and stuff, and I don't see too many of those. I see a big debate about GM crops, which I don't want to get into right now because that's a whole video in and of itself. But Equivocal Truth says, Lily, can you make a video emotional processing and therapy you've done, healing from narcissistic abuse? You seem much further ahead than even a year ago. I'd love to heal too. Yeah, absolutely. I have some videos coming up too that are about kind of that healing process and facing my demons, so to speak. So this will definitely be in the works. It's been an intense 10 years of my life, and the last year has definitely, I feel like I did a lot of groundwork and then got up to this last year, and I finally got to the point where I understood some of the tools that I had been hearing about in theory for years, but didn't know how to actually implement in my life. And I feel like I've gotten to a point where I've been able to implement those. The other key change is that Levi, in the last year or two, has been much more open to talking about deep stuff. And that's kind of been a struggle throughout our relationship. Early on, I would want to talk about something, and our communication would be an issue. How I communicated was definitely an issue. So we've had to be really specific about how we communicate with each other to be able to talk about hard stuff. And so us being able to work through a lot of stuff has really helped me in being able to work through my own stuff at the same time and feel supported while I'm feeling really crappy feelings. Okay? Do you have any videos tackling emotional coping with heightened awareness? Especially the deeper I learn veganism runs through society, the more detached I feel from everything. Friends, work, once, yeah. I have some older videos about, like, the grief that you feel from just being aware of everything that's happening in the world and feeling so detached from everything and really having to face all of that grief by yourself. I think that one was called The Grief of Awareness, if I remember correctly. I don't have any recent videos, although it's something that I would like to talk about more. It can be so difficult feeling so isolated and having all of these feelings, and if you ever try to express those feelings, people come at you like, oh, why are you doing this to yourself? You're such a baby. So, Jessica says, does sodium affect your heart rate like it does blood pressure? I'm not sure. That's a good question. I would have to look that up and get back to you because I don't want to just spout off random stuff. I know that if you have really low sodium, you can end up having things like heart palpitations and heart issues. So, but I'm not sure if you eat more, does it affect your heart? Because it does affect blood pressure. If your blood pressure is higher, your heart is usually pumping harder, or it has to pump more often. So I suppose it definitely could. Demon says, I work with high school kids trying to get them to just do their work, and some of them refuse to do even the simplest things to improve their lives, and it's like, no wonder people are so apathetic. Yeah, and the reasons why people are so apathetic, like, I've always been a person that tends to blame people for stuff like that. I'm always like, oh, you did this to yourself. And there's definitely part of it is just that people need to do better for themselves, but another part of it is, what are they supposed to feel when we're living in a society that's so disconnected and so mean all the time? How are people supposed to get excited about improving their lives, and especially in lower socioeconomic areas where you look at it and these kids probably see their parents working their asses off and not getting anywhere, and now they're aware that going to college doesn't guarantee you a job, and it just puts you into major student debt that you can't get rid of. Like, God, I don't blame them. Obviously, we're here and no one's gonna save you at this point, so what are you gonna do about it? Do you want to be an apathetic blob for the rest of your life, or what? It's a very complicated issue. But I understand that must be really, really frustrating. She says, I feel like there's a lot of repressed anger that they don't know what to do with it, so they just turn everything off and act like anything important is stupid and avoid it entirely. Yeah, a big part of that is going numb, and they've been told since they were little kids going to school not to express their feelings and to just sit down and shut up and listen to it. And the system as it is now is not serving very many people very well. Jenny Beans says, I feel a large amount of grief when I see animals tortured. I can't watch any of those movies on Netflix. Yeah, it's really hard. I find it so difficult too every time I see that, and I'm reminded of what's really going on every minute around the world. It's heartbreaking. It's really heartbreaking. I look forward to a future when that's not the case. And I really hope, I know I've mentioned cultured meats several times before, but I'm really looking forward to those taking over the market and just making animal products from animal foods obsolete. Oh, hey Lucy, I'm glad you got here even if it's the end. All right. Yeah, I'm so glad you guys came, and I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. I have, as usual, forgot to drink any water, and I'm starting to feel it. Yeah, Backspace says, and sometimes junk food is one of the few good things people have in their lives, and they can't imagine giving up the food that they, Giving it up for food that they think will taste like cardboard. Yeah. You know, that's... Thanks for reminding me, Cass. I'll do that in just a second. Yeah, so, people finding pleasure in food is something that's real, you know, for a lot of people, especially if you're overweight or you're dealing with chronic pain issues or chronic health issues where you just don't feel good. It can definitely seem like the only thing that's going to help you to feel good and the only joy that you have in your life is eating. And I understand that. I'm not going to fault anybody for that, you know. That is a hard position to be in. And I'm not sure that I would have the emotional strength to get out of that if I was really in it. Definitely kudos to the people who do muster that gumption and courage inside of themselves to make a change and to face that pain without the comfort of the junk foods. But, you know, that's part of why I feel so bummed when I see kids who are being fed junk or kids who are obese or morbidly obese already, because it's like you've just set them up. They're going to have to make some incredibly hard choices to be able to improve from that point, and it's always going to be a little bit of an uphill battle for them, and that just breaks my heart. Completely breaks my heart. Okay, I'll wrap this up. Cass was nice enough to remind me that I was going to talk about the Daily Dozen. So, if you guys, I assume you guys know, but who knows, you might not. Dr. Greger has his Daily Dozen. Let me find it here. And, it's not just, you know, oh, you have to eat these 12 foods and then you'll be fine. It's like you have to eat several servings of each of the 12 foods. And, I've seen several comments from people on Instagram and also YouTube that ticking all of these boxes every day can be really difficult. And I tell you right now, I probably don't tick every single box every single day. I probably only get like 2 servings of beans a day. I only get berries maybe 4 times a week because they're so damn expensive. Other fruits, I'm good on. Cruciferous vegetables, you only need 1 serving. I've gotten better about that, although those cruciferous veggies are usually my greens. And I would say at least 5 days a week I'm pretty good at the greens. Other vegetables, I'm fair on. I'm probably getting those. Flax seeds, I get those again 3, 4, 5 times a week. Sometimes I have other seeds instead of the flax seeds. Nuts, I definitely don't get those every day. Spices, more or less. Whole grains, I probably get 1 or 2 servings, so it's not a big deal for me. And then beverages, I'm all right. And exercise, again, 3, 4, maybe 5 times a week I get my exercise, like I'm supposed to, right? So this isn't, it's like you don't have to check every single one off in order to be healthy. He based this off of research studies indicated that people who, generally speaking, ate that much of a type of food were healthier. Or these foods are so healthy that we should really be eating them every day, right? So it's not necessarily if you eat this every day, you're going to be in perfect health. And if you don't eat all of this every day, you're going to fall apart. You're not going to be healthy. It's definitely not that. You just do your best to get in what you can. You understand? All right. I'll answer this question. Blue Sky says, is it okay to drink water before bed? Equivocal Truth says, if I drink too much before bed, I'll have to get up to pee and everything. Yeah, that's... So this is one of those things where if you feel thirsty and you want to drink water before you go to bed, sure, it's not going to hurt you. If you've had a big meal, say dinner, and your stomach is still full around the same time, I recently made the video about drinking water after meals, and it's not necessarily wise to drink a bunch of water on a full stomach. It will dilute your digestive fluids and enzymes and everything and kind of inhibit digestion, but it's also not something that you need to freak out about. Like Equivocal Truth said, I definitely find that if I drink water before bed, I'm getting up and peeing all the time, and it really disrupts my sleep. You know, I'll get up one time in the night to pee. I'm okay with that. But 2, 3 times, 4 times a night is not acceptable as far as I'm concerned. So, not happening. Other than that, it's just your call if you're thirsty. I know some people are like thirsty, they wake up in the middle of the night and drink water. That's fine too. It's not a big deal. Okay? Alright, you guys, we're at 100 minutes, so I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you all for showing up. Equivocal Truth says, Lily, do you pee every 10 minutes in the morning after all the fluid? I do, and it's annoying. I wouldn't say every 10 minutes, but I'm definitely peeing once an hour after, you know, when I have my 40 ounces and then a smoothie and a glass of tea. Like, I'm peeing plenty, but after 10 years of hydrating like this, my body's pretty used to it, so it expects all of the fluids in the morning, and it does a pretty good job at holding on to it. One last little thing about the Daily Dozen app. Yeah, so there's an app for iPhone and Android that Dr. Greger put out. It's free, so you just go and you download, look up Daily Dozen on the App Store, and then download it, install it, and you just open it, and it refreshes itself every single day, and you just click on it. So say you sit down and have a cup of beans and a cup of rice and some cut up vegetables with lettuce. You would tick off 2 beans and a serving or 2 of whole grains, a serving of greens, and a serving of other vegetables, and that would be your daily, you know, that would contribute towards your daily dozen. And then you'll be able to get an idea of where you're coming up short and where you are regularly succeeding. Okay? Okay, guys, thank you for showing up. I actually have the live How Not to Die book club tonight, too, that I'll be going to, and we're just going over the first couple of chapters tonight, so that's exciting. I have to say I'm really getting to know this book. Alright. Louisa says, can you do another what I eat in a day? Yeah, I have at least like 45 what I eat in a day's on my channel, so check out that playlist for sure. Okay? Okay. Thank you guys so much. I hope you all have a lovely evening and a really nice, restful weekend. I hope you guys stay warm, and I apologize if you can hear that siren going by, but yeah, that's just me, and I'm gonna try to relax and apologize to Levi for being an asshole today. Okay. Okay, you guys. Take care. I'll see you all later. Bye. Oh, and next week, 3 chapters. What do we got? We got chapters 8, 9, and 10 next week. Be on it. Alright. Bye, you guys.